wouldn't mind, we'd like for you to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your personal background, where you're born, where you grew up, where you went to school.
I'm Bill McCann. I was born in Winchester. Grew up on a farm over there. Had my 78th birthday this week. And it's a lot changed since the Depression years and growing up on a farm. But it was very pleasant. I worked hard there during the war years, and I was old enough to work on the farm, but wasn't old enough to be in the Army at that time. So I went to Clark County High School. I went to UK starting in 1947, and I graduated from law school in '52. I worked for 1 year at the Court of Appeals, which of course was in the Supreme Court of Kentucky. Worked for Judge Bert Combs, which was a nice experience. Then I spent 1 year in the JAG Corps in the Army. We spent 3 years in the JAG Corps in the Army, and came back and started private practice in 1950, fall of '56, I guess it was. And started practicing with my father and Herb Sled. And then after my father died, we joined with John Y. Brown and Brown, Sled, and McCann. That was in 1960. And we stayed there until after John Y.'s death, we merged with Tarrant Combs in 1985, and stayed there until I retired in 1998.
Wow.
So that's a thumbnail sketch of the whole thing.
That sounds like a thumbnail sketch of the legal community in Lexington. A little bit of everything. What memories do you have of law school and your law classes, your law professors? Anybody stands out?
I enjoyed law school. Paul Oberst was my favorite professor. I liked constitutional law and torts, which were the two things he taught. Who taught criminal law that was so notorious, but I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, that's been a while.
Yeah, I can't think of his name right at the moment. But law school was interesting. It was small at the time. I think we had something like 90 graduating in my class, which is the largest ever been at that time. One female. So that's all changed. Of course, no blacks at that time. And but law school was a pleasant experience for me.
Well, what are some of your early memories of the courtroom when you were first starting out?
Much more informal than today. We had a lot less hustle and bustle, more friendliness amongst lawyers, more trustworthiness among lawyers. We had Judge Chester Adams when I started, who was a fine gentleman, and then we had one more judge, and then we've had a lot more since that time. We had motion hours on Saturday morning, which was kind of a social hour as well as a motion hour. And so there weren't many lawyers that we went to motion hour almost every Saturday. And of course, people quit working on Saturday morning. But yeah, it was more of an atmosphere of friendliness, I think, than not that we didn't compete, but or try to win for our client, but there was more ability to coordinate time and schedule and that sort of thing. You've probably heard this before from most lawyers my age.
Similar, I guess. Were trials conducted the same way as they are now?
Oh, basically the same, yes.
Do you have any interesting experiences with juries or stories that you might want to share?
Well, the courtrooms are interesting. There is that about them. I've tried a lot of cases in the mountains, and they're always fun. I don't know about sharing those. I could tell a couple, maybe. I will tell one about jury selection. You know, we lawyers are supposed to know something about jury selection. And so we were John Y. and I were trying a case in Whitesburg with Harry Cotterill was a local counsel who had gotten John Y. into it. I was kind of just along. Heck, this has been been better than 40 years ago, 45, 50 years ago. And so we went back to select the jury, and John Wise said to Harry, you know these people, you decide who you want to select. And so he named several, and we ought to strike this one and this one. And then he said the fellow here with the name of Pitts said, I'm not real sure about Mr. Pitts. He's kind of loud, and if he's on your side, he's okay, but I'm a little uncertain about him, and named two of the others. And finally said, well, I think we ought to strike Mr. Pitts. So I took the jury list out to the clerk and struck Pitts and two others, and we sat down at the jury at the table. I was going to make the opening statement, and the fellow beside me, he wasn't from 2 or 3 feet away. He opened the conversation and said, "So you fellows are from Lexington?" I said, "Well, I'm really from Winchester," because I kind of related to Winchester more then. I wanted to be from a small town anyway. He said, "Is that right?" I said, "I lived in Winchester a long time." He said, "Did you ever know Stanley Pruitt?" Well, he happened to be my grandfather, and he asked me about a couple of my uncles and other people. Finally, I said, "What's your name?" It was Mr. Pitts. So I went back out to Harry and John White and said, they relayed that story. I said, maybe we ought to leave Mr. Pitts on the jury. Then I unstruck Mr. Pitts, and he served on the jury. And we tried the case, and the jury came in, and it was 9-3, and Pitts did not sign the verdict. We got a verdict, which was reasonable, about $10,000, which was a lot of money back in those days, you know. And so I was going out the courtroom. Mr. Pitts came and sort of sidled up to me and said, "I held out for you fellas for $25,000. He hadn't signed it because it wasn't enough." So shows how little we know about jurors, really. Much more sophisticated now, though, with jurors.
It's hard to predict on that. Do you have any memories of the Fayette County Bar Association? Were you involved much with the Bar Association?
I never was involved with the Fayette County Bar Association. Herb Slid, of course, was my partner, and he was involved in all of it, and so I sort of turned that over to him. He did a great job with that, and the State Bar Association, too. So I never was really involved. I went to all the meetings, but I did not participate.
Do you remember any activities that the Bar Association sponsored, or any events that you attended?
Well, they had the annual picnic. You've heard about the picnic, I'm sure. They had some celebrated conversation at the picnic. And honored somebody with the Marvin Award every year, which was a lot of fun. Then you got kind of out of hand, you know, and got a little bit too, I guess, too much for people to sort of enjoy. But early on, it was a lot of fun. And they announced the Marvin Award winner, that lawyer who had messed up more than anybody else during the course of the year. So that was a lot of fun. Leslie Morrison, of course, just recently died, was one of the ringleaders of that. And it was a lot of fun.
Did attorneys perform very much pro bono work in your early days of practice?
Not much, except as assigned by a judge to defend a particular. You were just selected, and you were in the courtroom, and you were named to provide the defense or guardian ad litem, something like that.
Did you have any political involvement?
Yeah, I was in the legislature once in got elected in the fall of 1969. The same year that Bob Stevens was elected county judge, I was elected state representative. And I was in a Republican district, not a very good politician anyway, and the only reason I won, I think, is because all Democrats won that year. Joe Johnson was supposed to have been the odds-on favorite for county judge re-election, and he had done some things that made some people mad, and he didn't carry the weight of the Republican ticket, and so we all won. I really enjoyed serving in the legislature, and was involved in several things there that I think were kind of interesting and important. One was I sponsored the merger legislation that permitted merger of Lexington Fayette County government. I had been on the Planning and Zoning Board, and I knew how critical it was, or how difficult it was to be reporting to two separate governmental bodies. And so Bart Peake asked me if I would assist him with that. Bart was a wonderful man. He was very strong, and he had been county judge, and he felt it was very important that we have merged government. So we worked on that together, and we got it passed. Of course, at that time, people were thinking, well, if we got it past the legislature, but you'll never get it beyond here, and they'll never pass muster with the court system. Bill Lyons, UK professor, got very much involved with that, and he was very instrumental in getting the signatures on the affidavits and getting it moving. And it did pass, and it did get the affidavits, and so we started the merged government, and then I was on the merger commission as vice chairman of that, and Bill Lyons was chairman. And I think we did a pretty good job on that charter. And I really think we got an excellent council this time around. I did serve on the council for one term too. And then I served, after I was in the legislature, I ran for re-election, did not win. And so I had worked with Julian Carroll while I was working on the higher education issues down in Frankfurt, and asked him to appoint me to the Council on Higher Education, which he did. So I served for 8 years on the Council on Higher Education, 3 of those years as chairman. And that was very interesting and exciting at the time. So I had that involvement politically, and realized I was not really a politician, so I did not enjoy politicking anyway. You got to enjoy being out front and talking, and that wasn't really what I enjoyed doing. But I did enjoy serving the legislature.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about lawyering. How did lawyers treat each other when you first started practicing? Do you think this has changed a lot over the years?
Well, I think it has. I think there was a pretty clear understanding that, you could, first of all, you could rely on what they told you, and you could work around schedules, and you could rely upon verbal scheduling, and not everything was done by motions. Not that everything's done by motions today, but there's a lot more of it done that way, I think, and it's more difficult, I think, to schedule. Of course, I'll tell you, having been retired for 8 years, you get out of the loop pretty quick. So it probably changed in that 8 years. But when I last practiced, it seemed like to me it was less able to cooperate with the opposing counsel than it had been early on.
What was the reputation of the profession when you first started? Has that changed?
Of the profession? Mm-hmm. Well, my approach to the profession certainly is different from what it is today. I really thought we were supposed to be, sort of the next best friend of the neighborhood, and you served the people, and you were giving advice and counsel to people. And of course, we had a minimum fee schedule back in early on where you couldn't charge more than the minimum fee, otherwise you were advertising if you charged more than the minimum, and the minimum was pretty daggone low. So we didn't have advertising, and we had the minimum fee, and so those things have made a tremendous difference. I think the advertising makes a tremendous difference. It changes the atmosphere of the public, changes the atmosphere of the lawyers. And since the plaintiff lawyers are making a lot on contingent fees, and the defense lawyers came up with their fee schedules and keeping time sheets and all that business, and so you got associates and partners, and you can build up as much time on the defense as you want to, actually. And the contingent fees, I think, is too much in these big cases. So that's put a great pressure on making money. Not this much different from what the general population looks at today. The emphasis on money is a lot different today than it was 50 years ago. Whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, I don't know. I'm not here to judge. I'm just saying it's very different, and there's a lot more emphasis on advertising. I really am concerned about some of the advertising for lawyers, but also some of the other advertising, which is awful shady sometimes.
Who were some of the leading figures in the law during your early days of practice?
Oh, golly, I don't know. Well, Saul Keenan Park was a big law firm back then, as it is now, at least locally. And they had 7 lawyers, and they were all very, very fine gentlemen. I can't name them all, but John Davis and Bill Swinford Sr. and Gail Money and the others over there, Bob O'Dear, were ones that I looked up to and enjoyed practicing with. I had cases with them. I don't know who else I would name, really. There are others I should be naming. I think John Waugh had a reputation as a pretty significant trial lawyer, and he was. And I tried lots of cases with him. And but it's changed today because, you know, the preparation for a lawsuit now is much more intense than it was then. Take all these depositions, and you get all these expert witnesses, and you get all these, you know. So it's a very different practice than it was 50 years ago. And verdicts then, $10,000 verdict was a big verdict. Now, if they're not several $1 million, it's not worth talking about. So there's such differences, and then technology has just revolutionized the law practice as well as everything else. So it's hard for me to relate to some of those changes. I quit just in time. I would never have been able to keep up with technology because it's just changed dramatically in even the 8 years since I retired.
What type of practice did you have?
Generally, well, civil practice. I did some criminal work, but I didn't like doing criminal defense work. I did some criminal defense work assisting John Waugh and writing briefs and that sort of thing. But I did not, and I assisted in some criminal trials, but I did not do much criminal trials. Did some plaintiff work, quite a bit actually, but I preferred civil defense, commercial litigation. I represented a lot of architects and engineers, and they were good clients, a lot of interesting cases. I did a lot of product liability cases, representing Michelin Tire Company, which is a great client. And those cases I enjoyed more than any other, the kind that you really can get involved in the technicalities of the case. And so that's what I enjoyed more than anything else.
What was the work environment like? Did you work a lot of hours per day? Was the dress code similar to what it is today?
Well, everything that's changed across the board too. You know, dress code. We always wore coat and tie, and that's not always true now. I worked hard. I think most lawyers did. Maybe not as hard as they do today. I don't know. I think the more technology you have, the more you can do, the more the work is put on you. There's the truth about it. So we're supposed to have technology to make things easier. I'm not sure it's done that. And there's a lot of pressure within law firms, at least the larger law firms, to get those billable hours out there. And there's a tremendous amount of competition in the law business, which maybe has some merit, and I'm sure it does. So, and the country is driven by money much more than it was 50 years ago. People have a lot more money and spend a lot more money and try to make a lot more money, and that kind of competition, I think, influences the law profession too.
What changes have occurred in the law during your practice? How has that affected your practice, do you think? Any major changes in law that you think have had a big impact?
I think that in the civil side, I think the thing that had the greatest impact on the practice of law in the civil side, at least in tort and product liability cases, is the comparative negligence versus the old contributory negligence as a defense. Used to be, if you had any degree of negligence would bar you from your claim. Well, the jury sort of accounted for that and made some adjustments, but it's a lot different when you compare negligence, and then even if your plaintiff is negligent, he can still recover. And I think juries, allow him to recover and then give him whatever they think he ought to have anyway. So that really changed the practice more than anything else, I think, in the civil practice.
Do you have any I was there stories where you were present at an event of any kind of historic significance? You talked about the merger of the city government, but are there any other instances that stand out?
Not really in the legal field. I had a lot of very interesting cases, and I enjoyed getting an interesting case and try to solve the puzzle. taking the deposition and looking up the law and doing that for an individual case. And that doesn't really sound very exciting, and probably not very exciting, but actually I enjoyed good cases and had a lot of them. I think several of the things I did outside the law I found really interesting. I worked on the Pritchett Committee for years and still am on it, but I was chairman for 3 years, and account higher education was very interesting for me. And the merger was very interesting for me. So those things outside the law were something I got very involved in. And got involved in a lot of very good cases that I enjoyed.
How were attorneys disciplined when you first started practicing? Has that changed over the years?
Well, not that I'm aware of in terms of real difference in the procedure or the way it's done. I think the Board of Governors reviews that, and I think the Bar Association does a pretty good job with that. It's like everything else, everything's bigger and more intense, but whether there's any real difference in fundamentally, I'm not sure that there is.
Well, what advice would you give to young lawyers?
I'd say do something besides try to make money, to be honest with you. I think that we're driven by the competition of getting in a big firm and making a lot of money, and we lose sight of what lawyers should be about. And that concerns me. That's bigger than lawyers, obviously. It's a social issue. But it concerns me that advertising and money seems to drive this country to a degree, and lawyers go right along with that, to a degree that I think is not real healthy.
What are the biggest challenges facing the legal profession today? Are they the same as when you first started practicing?
Basically the same. I think the biggest challenge is to get back to the idea of being I thought lawyers were the respected people in the community, in small communities like Winchester where I grew up, and I think they were in Lexington too. And they still are respected, but there's also another kind of a shadow about lawyers, that they're considered money driven and will do anything for money, and advertising increases that atmosphere. And they have a reputation of being looking for money. So I think the profession as a whole is not respected as much as I think it was 50 years ago, and that concerns me. We're not, of course, a lot of lawyers are in politics, and politics has got the same problem of, how honest is honest anymore. Maybe it's always been true that way, I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned about the direction the country's taking in terms of the power of advertising and the power of money.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions we have. If you have any particular story that you might want to share, or any funny thing that happened while you were practicing or out and about.
Well, not really. I tried a lot of cases in the Army for 3 years. I tried a lot of cases in civil practice and some in criminal law. And yeah, when you look back on it, there's nothing particularly different about those. That's what lawyers do. It's what I did. I'm not sure I was cut out to be a lawyer, but I think I became a pretty good lawyer, and so I represented my clients to the best of my ability, and most of the time I think pretty well. And that's what lawyering is all about, really, is representing your client. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
What actually attracted you to law? Why did you choose that as a profession?
I wanted to get off the farm and much anything else. I'd worked awful hard on the farm back when we had, they do the milking and feeding before you go to school, and after you get home, we worked with horses and mules, and it was pretty hard work, and cutting tobacco is hard work. So I thought I wanted to get off the farm, and that seemed to be a logical place. Of course, my father was a lawyer too, which led me in that direction. He didn't say be a lawyer, but it made it sort of easier to do that, I'm afraid. And so the combination of those two things, I think, led me into law. It's a good profession. I don't mean to disrespect it, because I think it is a good profession.
Shorter hours than being a farmer. Well, I appreciate it. I think that's everything we have on our list. And
Okay.
that was painless, right? That wasn't too bad.
That wasn't too bad. I don't know how much that's worth, but